This season of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast is proudly brought to you by Sheet Music Plus.
So yeah, I did a couple of rounds. So in my first interview, I literally just took her out for coffee and asked her a bunch of questions that I had prepared. And that was a bit daunting, having never done that, having not hired someone in that regard. But so yeah, if you're not confident about that, write a list. I would encourage other teachers to do that.
Welcome to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast, the place where teachers from around the world meet to share innovative ideas about music education. Listen and learn as we help you motivate your students, grow your income, expand your studio, and become a more creative piano teacher.
G'day everyone, and welcome back to Season 3, 2018 of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. You're listening to episode number 136. And a very special welcome if you're one of my Inner Circle piano teaching community members. My name is Tim Topham, your host for this show, and if this is your first time here, thanks heaps for tuning in. The Creative Piano Teaching Podcast is your home for inspiration, ideas, business, and teaching strategies to help support your teaching and grow your studio. In today's episode, we're exploring a case study from one of our members about how she started to grow her studio by hiring her first teacher. So if you're at a point in your studio when you've got a waiting list, or like my guest today, actually just wanted to cut down her teaching hours a little bit, then hiring a teacher can be a great move. And you'll be surprised that it's not that scary as you might think. Even if you're not ready for this quite yet, make sure you listen in to today's episode as my guest really puts everything on the table about her studio, her goals, and what she's planning, and I guarantee you'll find it inspirational. Today's show notes and full transcript are now available at timtopham.com/episode 136. My guest today is a University of Western Australia piano performance graduate who has played an active role as a performer, presenter, collaborative pianist, and an experienced teacher in both the West Australian community and abroad. She is currently on the West Australian Music Teachers Association Council, serving as Vice President, and was drawn to the Council in order to assist in improving the standard and quality of private music studio teaching in the state. She has strong experience in many forms of movement studies, including dance, yoga, Pilates, Alexander technique, as well as experience in the Taubman approach. In her spare time, she loves to explore new technology and apps to improve her teaching. She loves to learn new repertoire, play chamber music, cook up a storm, travel, and tend to her garden and chickens, would you believe? Welcome to the show, Anastasia Buettner-Moore.
Thanks for having me on, Tim. I appreciate it.
So you've been an Inner Circle member for a number of years now, and I was really excited to catch up with you when I was in Perth this year for the WAPPC and got to hear all about the great things you've been doing in your studio, including, most excitingly, hiring your first teacher to help you grow your studio. And so I thought, I've got to get you on board to talk about this, because I know there's lots of teachers who are at this stage where they're like, I've got a waiting list. Do I hire someone? Do I teach groups now? What do I do? So take us back to before all that happened. What was your studio like? How many students, how many hours were you working, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I suppose my studio was a little bit bananas before that. I just had far too many students to keep myself sane and to keep myself practicing. And I just felt really time poor, I suppose, and I knew something had to change. So yeah, I probably was teaching about 40, 50 students a week between the various schools that I was working at, as well as my home studio. And it was just all a bit much. So, yeah, I decided to cut right back this year and get someone else on board as a bit of an experiment, if nothing else.
An experiment which happens to have gone pretty well, I gather.
It's definitely made a huge difference, I think. So yeah, I've probably just about halved my teaching now, of my own personal teaching, I suppose. Although it's a bit all over the place because I do a lot of performance work as well. So I wanted to make some more space for that too, so I could afford to make that decision. But I also wanted to pick someone that I could sort of start small with while I kind of learn the ropes and find my feet. So my new teacher that I've hired only has 5 students, but I think it's a really good start while we're both learning.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll get on to how you found her and all that kind of stuff in a moment. But just on your studio or on your teaching before you made this decision, so you said you were teaching 50 to 60 kids at a variety of schools and at home, and you're a performer. And that does sound like a very busy load. What was the catalyst? What actually made you realize that actually, no, this isn't that cool. I'd prefer not to live like this.
I think it was just the 6 and sometimes 7 day weeks I was pulling, and I think it was more actually my partner. He works a real job, as he likes to call it. Not that piano teaching is not, but he gets his 9 to 5 and his weekends usually if he's not on site. And I just we actually decided we were going to buy a house and do some renovations of all things.
Right.
And I needed weekends and some time to project manage this. So that was just something else going on in my life that I thought, no, I need to take the plunge and do something else. So I've got some more space and time to do that.
Right. And I guess one of the easier options would have been to just reduce a day of teaching at a school or remove some private students who weren't actually practicing very much or something like that. Why didn't you go down one of those routes of just reducing the teaching that you were doing?
Well, I did do a bit of that too, but I thought, I think it would be really good if I can kind of keep a few of them on board. I felt really bad about having to get rid of so many students, to be honest. And just sort of restructuring. I didn't want to take a huge income hit either. So I thought, this is probably the next best way to kind of keep that going at the same time.
Right. And so when you finally thought, okay, I'm going to hire someone, I'm going to try this out, was that a hard decision? Was it kind of scary, or was it actually really exciting for you?
Terrifying. No, terrifying and a bit exciting, I suppose, because it's generally the way I approach most projects. I kind of leap into it with a full faith and see what happens. But no, I think it has been quite an exciting thing, because once I sort of commit to something, then I think that perspective changes.
And I guess two of the big questions are to make sure you can afford to pay them would be one, and to make sure they've got enough students to actually work with. So how did you cover those two issues?
Well, that was something I thought a lot about before I jumped into this. And I guess what I was really thinking was I want someone who's happy for a start to be able to just take on only a few to begin with. Because I ended up handing over some of my students that I had been teaching before, which was, kind of difficult for them because, just to say, well, I'm actually still here, but I can't teach you
anymore.
So, but, please feel free to study with this person under my brand, basically. So that was a bit of a difficult one to approach. But also, so I'll tell you a bit more about who I have hired in a minute. But I went for a graduate who's still very much in the performance game too. But they're also just kind of finding their own feet in their teaching. So I wanted someone I could kind of mold, and she was still busy with her honours stuff, so she didn't want to take on too much, which was perfect for me, because I thought I just need to have a baby model of this that I can play with, and if it all goes to poo, it doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. And so, did you know your teacher, or did you advertise?
No, I advertised.
Right. And where did you advertise?
Well, because I was going for a sort of student type teacher, I advertised on our local university Facebook pages, so UWA and the Whopper Pianist Facebook pages, and I also created a separate page on my website so that they could kind of go through that process as well.
Right. So you created a page on your website with the information about the job, so you could link to that page from the ads that you left in the Facebook groups. Right.
Yeah.
And so the two universities you mentioned, they're both based in Perth, where you are. But do you think this idea would work in other parts of the world?
I guess so. I suppose because I am quite heavily involved with universities still, with my own teaching there as well. That was kind of my first obvious point of call. But I suppose, if you're Australian, you could probably even go down the Gumtree route. I might have even put it on Gumtree now I think back of it.
And Gumtree is like our Craigslist for the US teachers, I guess, but slightly less dodgy looking.
For sure. But I mean, there's so many, as you would know, there's so many piano teaching Facebook pages out there as well, specifically if you're after a piano teacher. I'm sure you could find somewhere in your locality.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that you made a conscious decision to hire a graduate or someone that was still studying rather than someone that was really experienced. And I guess when you're hiring people, you could go for one or the other. On one hand, you've got the graduate who you can mold, as you said, and create the right the exact teacher that you want out of them, I guess.
Mm.
Or you could go for the experienced person who you can kind of say, okay, just go and do what you do because you're amazing anyway. So why did you decide, or did you have that question? Did you ask yourself that same question? And why did you go down that graduate route?
Yeah, for sure. So I did ask myself that question, and that's exactly why I went for it because, I thought, well, partly because I'm still quite young myself. I've worked in positions in other fields where I have been training people that are older than me, and that's always a little bit awkward sometimes. Like they don't necessarily listen. So I thought, I want to go for someone a little bit younger, and also I'm very passionate about music teaching. And I know that in my own journey, apart from my own teachers, I haven't had much training in teaching itself. And it's something I probably would have liked. And I thought, oh, well, they don't really offer a lot of these courses in pedagogy, like instrumental pedagogy specifically. And, how cool would it be if I could kind of take someone under my wing and show them what I've learned? And I think in that regard, I think I made a really good decision because, that way I also can kind of put my own footprint on how I want my teaching to be run. And, they're a lot more receptive because they haven't been in the profession so long and they don't really know quite as much as someone who would be, say, more experienced. So they're a bit more open-minded in that regard, I think.
Yeah, that's great.
That was my logic.
Yeah. So, well, you better tell us about this amazing person that you hired and who I actually had the chance to meet.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, she was lovely. Tell us about her and what does she do? Where does she teach?
Where does she teach? Okay, so as I mentioned, she's still doing her honours. She's very much around the area that of the university and around where a lot of my students were before. And
so
anyway,
she's about 21-ish.
Yeah, probably about that. Yeah. She does mobile lessons for me, so that takes away the need for having to find a space, like a commercial space, or having her in my space, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more convenient for the parents and the families. I think that was one of the catalysts for a lot of the students that I handed over that I had been teaching previously was that they didn't have to travel. That was kind of the trade-off for them.
I see. Okay. So they were coming to you in your studio, and for those that she took on, you're like, well, the bonus is you're going to get to have lessons in your house.
Yep. Pretty much.
Right. Okay.
And it works out well because of, just the location of where my studio is and just the logistics. It worked out much better. She's a lot closer to them from her own home as well. So, that worked out really well.
And are her students all in the same kind of area, suburb?
Mostly. Yeah.
And does she teach them all on one day or one a day, or how does that work?
I think she sees 3 of them on one day and then she sees the other 2 on another day, but it fits in with her schedule. She sort of sorts that out. I just make sure that I know when she's teaching and that they get the emails to remind them and make that all run smoothly.
Right, okay. So she does her own scheduling then?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, in consultation, but she kind of organises it to suit her timetable.
Correct.
Yeah,
yep.
And how do you work the payments from the parents?
So in my studio, everyone pays a monthly fee. It's an annual fee that's broken up into monthly installments. So it's exactly the same process in that regard.
Right.
So I chase them up with a billing, or I should say my virtual assistant does, and I pay her accordingly to the hours that we've negotiated, or however much she's been teaching as she goes. But I still get that monthly fee.
Right.
And then,
And is she a contractor then, or an employee?
No, she's a contractor in that regard.
So she sorts out her own superannuation, insurance, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And you just pay her. Do you do it each month?
No, it's generally each week, or whenever she invoices me, depending on the teaching. She's free to send me those invoices whenever she likes because she is a contractor.
Yeah, right. Okay, great. And have you got a you might not want to say exactly, but have you got a ballpark kind of figure for what hourly rate someone who's a graduate or doing her honours would get for this kind of work?
Well, she's on, what am I paying her? I think it's around the 60 something. I should know this off the top of my head, but
For an hour.
for an hour, yeah,
Yeah.
which isn't too bad. I thought, well,
That's
and that was
actually
another
pretty
thing.
good.
Well, that was something too I considered in terms of a percentage, obviously with my own profit from this, because that's kind of the point of the exercise. But
Right.
I thought, I don't want to be one of those people that, like when you've got people that work in, say, one of those kind of music shop schools where they get paid such a poor amount, you'd probably earn more at Chicken Treat or something,
Right.
So, and I know personally I wouldn't be happy working for that. And I also, another thing that might be worth mentioning on that scale was I paid her only 50% in the first 3 months of her teaching, just as like while I was kind of giving her a bit of a trial.
So
and
50% of the hourly rate you were bringing in.
Receiving, yes.
Right, got it.
Yeah. So she probably isn't on about 60-70% of that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that sounds quite high, but I guess the advantage you've got is you're not paying for rent and studio space and electricity and all that kind of stuff, which a lot of music school owners are, which would mean that they're paying a fair bit less. So it's a nice. I think it's a really sensible approach to expansion. What you've done, I think it's really great, and I hope teachers listening are going, well, this is actually, I could do this. It's not a massive, great, having to outlay lots of money for a new commercial space or anything like that. I think it's a very clever approach.
Thank you.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor, Sheet Music Plus. I'm sure you've heard of Sheet Music Plus. It's always one of the top search results when you're looking for sheet music because they have the world's largest collection. But did you know they also have a program to help piano teachers save money on their orders? The Easy Rebates program is exclusively for music teachers and gets you things like 8% cashback on all your orders. You can also earn 8% cashback on purchases by your students if you set up lists of music to buy. And I've done this in the past, and not only does it make the students' or the parents' life easier, you also get that little benefit as well. There's also a $5 bonus when you refer a new member to the program, and it's completely free to join. Since Sheet Music Plus has over 1 million titles, including print and digital downloads, it's the best place to go when you have student requests or need something for an upcoming recital. So you should definitely take advantage of this free program. Go to sheetmusicplus.com/easy rebates, EASYREBATES, to find out more and sign up today. You mentioned that one of the reasons you've got a younger teacher is to train them. How do you do that when they're not in your physical space? And do you pay them for the time if you're training them?
Okay, so thanks for bringing that up. So I don't pay her for that time, and then she doesn't pay me either. So we have 1 hour of mentoring a week, basically, where she comes to my home studio, and well, it's not every week. It's kind of when it suits us both, but pretty much every week during school term.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we cover all sorts of things during that hour, just depending on where she's at and what she needs. And I'm always checking in with where she's at with her current students if there's been any problems and that have popped up throughout the week. So, that's based on an agreement we discussed, and she's happy with that. I'm happy with that. I said, we'll probably just trial this for a year and see how we go, because she knows I'm also new to this. And, she's happy with that arrangement and I'm happy. So
it's effectively you're giving her an hour's coaching a week for free, but that's also training her for you. So it works both ways.
Yep.
And at that, is that an opportunity for you to work out whether she's teaching properly and to your standards?
Yes, absolutely. It's it can be quite revealing sometimes when she says, "Oh, well, I tried this with them," and I'm going, "No, don't do that."
Well, that's good, because I mean, one of the tricks or tricky parts of having a traveling studio and employing teachers to do it is you really don't know what's going on, of course, most of the time. So having that kind of check-in, I would imagine, would be really appropriate. Do you ever go and sit in on a lesson? Or would you, down the track, sit in on a lesson that she teaches at someone's house just to, check things are going okay?
I did approach her about that when I interviewed her in the beginning. I said, "Would you be comfortable with me sitting in at any point and doing something like that?" But I have to admit I haven't really felt the need, just because she does seem to demonstrate in those hourly sessions that we have that she's on the right track.
Mm.
And something I suppose my way of doing that, because I don't want to be intrusive either, is quite often with a lot of my students, I film a lot in my studio, in terms of just making little performance recordings that the student can send to their parents, and particularly if the parents don't sit in on the lesson. But I'll often give Maria a little video assignment each week, and say, oh, is there any chance you could send that to me? All of my students sign a little disclaimer agreement thing that they can, that their stuff can be used for marketing purposes, but this is really research as well. And anyway, so she will send me a little video of how they're progressing, and I can see a lot from that little snippet, even if it's just one little song about how they're going technically, and just if musically even. So I think that's sufficient.
I think that's a good approach, and as you say, far less awkward, or what's the right word, imposing.
Exactly.
Than having you sitting in on the lesson too.
Yeah.
Do you prescribe what method books and curriculum and the order of concepts that you teach in and things like that to your teacher, or do you let them do it themselves?
So that's something we have spent a lot of time on in the earlier part of the year, was going through various method books, because she hadn't had much exposure to what's out there. And so I've shared a lot about the different ones I would use, but I suppose I'm a real book hopper. I don't use one resource all of the time, and it's very much teaching to the student and what they need. I've got a pretty good idea about the sequencing of delivery, so we've discussed a lot about that. And she's got the resources. I've provided her with several books that she can go through and go, all right, well, that sort of fits in that boat. But really, I like to give her own flexibility, but she does ask me for recommendations and suggestions, and I'm really happy that she's comfortable enough to ask me that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's just working really, really well for you. And I guess you've mentioned that obviously you've got more time for yourself and what you want to do now, but how has your day-to-day changed since you've hired this other teacher?
Well, I think that one of the best things is not having to drive so much, which has been really great.
So were you personally driving to to some of your students, or all of them?
No, I suppose I was teaching more at the schools and that, so I decided to completely restructure, and I'm teaching primarily from home this year. Right,
okay.
Which has been really nice. And also, as I say, not having to teach on weekends has been wonderful. Yeah. Really good.
And so it allows you, so do you perform or do you accompany? What you mentioned performance before.
Yeah, so I do a fair bit of accompanying and performing. So I have a piano trio, as well as so we play quite frequently, and I do a lot of like duos as well. I've got a few friends that we do a lot of piano duo stuff with, as well as I do a lot of accompanying for university recitals and AMEB and school exams, and so there's always something.
Got more time to prepare for those and do those kinds of things too.
Time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right. So did you make any mistakes in this process that other teachers could learn from, or it actually sounds like it's gone pretty well?
I don't know. I think I wasn't sure in the interim. I kind of felt a bit bad because I had almost promised Maria that she was getting 2 students, and I did a bit of a trial lesson where she sat in and watched me teach with. This is one of the ones that I passed on, one that I had been previously teaching, and they decided that they didn't actually want Maria to teach them after all, because they were too happy with my teaching and they were prepared to drive at stupid hours to come and see me regardless.
Okay.
So I felt a little bit bad about that. And, as a result, I was paying her a little bit extra for kind of driving time, but then it turned out that I wasn't actually making anything from that. But she kind of realized at the end, because that was during the 50% phase where I was only paying her half. And she said, oh, you've been so generous anyway. And she thankfully said, oh, no, well, you don't need to pay me for that. That's fine.
Right.
Which is good. So just a couple little things like that. But really, I don't think I've made any huge blunders.
No, that's great. Well, you've thought through it very intelligently, obviously. So just to confirm, does she get paid for the time taken to travel or not?
No,
No,
because
okay.
it's so close to where she lives. Yeah.
Okay. And how many students do you think she could actually take on? Because I assume you're getting new requests through your website every now and then.
Mm,
Do you
yeah.
just send them all to her?
It really depends on the student. I suppose something else that has freed me up a lot more this year, or having this time, is I get a lot of quite sort of specialist niche sort of students, particularly a lot of casual drop-in, like university students and music teachers who have injury stuff because of my Taubman thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I don't get quite so many of the generic requests anymore. But when I do, I did get one earlier in the year, and that's when she picked up another 2 students. So she started with 3, and then she's got these other 2 now. But
Right.
yeah, if there are more, then I feel we've got that flexibility.
And can she continue to teach her own students as well, or do you have some kind of non-compete
Oh no,
disclosure
of course
thing?
not. No. She's more than welcome to teach her own students.
Right. And if she's sick or anything like that, what's your policy with makeups and let's talk both directions. So what about students who suddenly on holiday or they're not at home and she goes around to their house? And also, what if she's sick? How do you approach those two things?
Okay, so in terms of if the students are suddenly on holiday, and that I do have a very I suppose rigid is probably not the best word, but I'm quite strict about my policies in terms of cancellation, and that's another thing. I'm very fussy about making sure that my teacher informs me of when she's teaching, because I send out, or my software sends out automatic reminders that
Mm-hmm.
they need 48 hours cancellation policy, and I also send out a semester schedule of all the dates that she will potentially be available to teach, or she must teach on those dates. If she can't, of course, there's wiggle room to reschedule if they have a bit of forward thought about that. But I guess she was sick, I think, only once in the last semester, and all we did was just move the lesson to another week. But I have it in my policy too. Generally, we don't do makeups unless it can be mutually agreeable.
Right.
Yeah, so we would just credit them, the client, on the next invoice, I suppose.
Yep. Great. And what software do you use?
Okay, I love my scheduling software. It's Acuity Scheduling, if anyone's used that before.
Acuity, great. Yeah, we'll pop a link in the show notes for that.
Yeah, it's very, very user friendly, and I'm reasonably tech savvy, but this just makes my life so much easier.
And that's not a music centric bit of software, is it?
Not at all. No.
And does it do billing?
It can. You can. It sort of links so you can be paid via PayPal or whatever. But I use a separate software for that.
Can you tell us what software you use for that, just in case people are wondering?
Yeah, I use Wave, which is a free accounting software.
Right, and so that does your monthly billing to credit cards automatically. Yep. Fantastic. Yeah, good. And look, any teachers who are listening who aren't yet automating their billing, please consider it, particularly in the United States, where people are still receiving checks too. I mean, checks have pretty much disappeared here in Australia, haven't they? I mean, I don't even know if I could cash a check here anymore. So, just given the software that's available, yes, you're paying 1-2% of the fee you get, but my golly, you're saving so much time and hassle. So I really do encourage teachers to do that. So wrapping things up, what would you say to other teachers who are considering whether they should do this?
Well, I wouldn't hesitate at all if you are considering doing this. I would also just say start small so you can find your feet. I'm really grateful that I haven't got any more to think about on that regard at this point of time, but I am just feeling increasingly more confident about being able to take on more students should they arrive.
Mm-hmm.
Just be really open in your communication with your new teacher, because especially if they know that you're new to the process, then they're probably going to be a lot more forgiving and happy to work it out alongside you, I suppose.
Yeah. And what are your plans for the future? Are you envisaging a massive studio and hundreds of teachers, or are you quite happy with the size that you've got now?
I'm thinking I'm going to do the same process and pick up a new grad at the start of next year. So I'm thinking if I can do that every year, then I'm helping a new fresh teacher kind of get into the workforce as well. And
that's great.
Yeah,
and you're also training them along at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know if I if I'm envisioning a massive studio, because I like my performance work a lot.
Yeah.
and I suppose it will just naturally continue to grow. But I'm happy with where I'm at for now.
You better give a plug for your trio at least. Where do people go to find out about that?
Oh, just keep an eye on our website, or my website, www.playwellperth.com.au, and just keep an eye on upcoming events.
That's great. And I forgot to ask actually, is Maria, is she a performance major or a pedagogy? Yes. Yeah. So she's a piano performance student.
Yes.
Who's interested in teaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I chose that as well, because that will also give, my students some events to go to as well with her recitals and things, and show that she's out there, playing at her best. And that's another thing too. I just wanted to mention is I'm very fussy, obviously being a performer myself, about making sure I hired a teacher that could play and play well.
Right.
Not someone who's probably hasn't touched their instrument for a very long time in a serious manner. So I wanted someone who was in that field as well.
Yeah, that makes me just think about one other question, and that's the interview process. Did you ask her to play? Did you ask to see her teach? Was it just a speaking interview? How did you do that?
So I did a couple of rounds. So in my first interview, I literally just took her out for coffee and asked her a bunch of questions that I had prepared. And that was a bit daunting, having never done that, having not hired someone in that regard. But so if you're not confident about that, write a list. I would encourage other teachers to do that. And I then also, when I invited her for the next round, I asked her to submit a recording that she's made in the last 6 months. And I was really happy with the standard of her playing as well. So. And also, just check in with the references. I would really recommend.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah, that's brilliant. Fantastic. Well, look, head to Playwell Perth, PERTH, that's Perth in WA here, .com.au to find out more about Annie. That's your studio website, I think.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And you can also catch Annie if you're an Inner Circle member in our forums too. So feel free to ask any questions. I know she's more than happy to give her advice. And I wondered if we could even share maybe your job ad or something like that for people who might be interested in doing the same kind of thing. So we'll have a chat with that after this. But that'd be great. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been great chatting with you.
Likewise, Tim. Thank you so much.
So what did you think? Did Annie make the whole process of hiring a teacher actually sound doable? Will you give it a go? When I listen to a young teacher like Annie, who's just making such great strides in her studio and making a conscious decision that, I don't want to teach quite so much. I want to actually put more time into performance, or more time into my family, or more time into the business side of my business so that I can keep growing it. Taking some of the teaching load off your plate and giving it to someone else can be a fantastic approach. And so I'm so excited that she shared with us how she went about it. And of course, there are many different ways you can go about doing this. Annie's is only one approach, but as you can hear, it's worked really well for her, and I know will continue to work well for her in the future. And remember, as we said in the interview, if you'd like to catch up with Annie and ask her any questions, then feel free to connect with her in our Inner Circle member forums. She's there answering questions, and she is a great support to our other members. So, quick reminders for next week. We've got our webinar on lead sheets. Remember, it's on Sunday night, the 26th, if you're in the United Kingdom, Europe, or USA, which is Monday morning here in Australia and in Hong Kong and Singapore and Perth, of course. It's a bit of an early one for you guys. It'll be 6 a.m. So the official time, 8 a.m. Melbourne time, Monday the 27th, it's our webinar all about lead sheets, why you should be helping students understand how to read them and how to go about it step by step with a master of creative piano teaching, that is Forrest Kinney. I can't wait for this webinar. I'm really, really hanging out for it. As you can tell, I'm so excited. Head to timtopham.com/webinar to register for this one. I know it's going to be very, very popular, so grab your seat now. Now, we're also at the end of week 1 of our 4-week challenge for our members. Jump in if you missed the start and you're a member. There's totally no problems if you would like to get get started now with whatever goals you have for the next 3 weeks. It is such a great way to actually structure your goal planning week by week and be able to come back and report on how things went, and to not only hold yourself accountable, but for us to cheer you on from the sidelines and help you with that accountability, which can so often get lost. And I know so many members who've done 4-week challenges with us before have said how important it is just to write down publicly what you plan to do, because you then feel a sense of obligation to get it done. It's really amazing. And I've found exactly the same thing myself when I've participated in these challenges. When I say to everyone, I'm going to be practicing 5 days a week for an hour, and I come back and I'm like, I didn't really do much practice, it's kind of embarrassing. So I hold myself accountable, as you will if you join us on one of these challenges. So make sure you sign up for that. If you're not part of my inner circle, then make sure you check it out at timtopham.com/community. On to next week's show now. My guest next week will be well known to all piano teachers. He is not only a well-known performer, speaker, and clinician, but he is the creator of Piano Adventures. Yes, Randall Faber is joining me for a chat, and we're going to be talking all about the genesis of his Faber Institute, how he came to be creating methods in the first place, and more about his recent work with Fred Karpov about forming an identity for a new American piano technique. It's a great discussion, and I can't wait to share it with you next week. Until then, I'm Tim Topham, and this is the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. We'd love to help take your teaching to the next level as a member of our supportive community. Use the coupon Piano Podcast for $100 off an annual membership of Tim's Inner Circle today. To find out more, head to timtopham.com/community.